So this video is to show you how to replace the fuel filter. Lift the rear portion of the rear seat. Lift the rear portion of the front seat. Turn this quarter turn. Run your fingers here. Lift this panel out and remove. You got 4 screws to remove from the top. And then there's this one in the nose. You know how to take the mirror off, right? Here. You have 2. Then there's 2 here. Now, the 2 on the engine spoiler. These 3, 1, 2, and 3, are longer than the other screws, except for the really long one under the mirror. Lift. Door open. Tab comes out. Panel is removed. Same deal, except you got this dangling off the end, because you don't need to take those 2 screws out. That is your fuel tank mount. Electrical connector is here. That will be disconnected. The fuel lines are here. This one is not equipped with quick disconnects, so you need some way to pinch these fuel lines off, because you will lose the contents of this tank. So pinch these off, loosen the screws. There's a special tool to separate the rubber hose off of the plastic tube that it rides over. But before we do any of that, we need to go back to this side, because you need to unbolt the oddments tray, now radio box, from the tank. There is a screw way down in here, and a 5mm, 3mm, and a 4mm. Bigger one because of the snorkel. That's right. You can disconnect the wire if you like. There's a nut right here. Probably the only time you'll ever use an 11mm. Goes right there. See? See where the hose, the tube turns to go to the airbox? Stick your finger in that bend. Now you take the tool, make sure you have tube side to tube and hose to hose, and put it against the hose side. And squeeze. Same on the bottom. Disconnect our electrical connector, split our hoses. You're now at that point where we remove the fuel tank. Straighten the handlebars. Lift the back. Slide the tank back a little bit. Get your hoses out from behind the right throttle cable. Almost an antique. Just like me. Wow! And then these are heavy, of course, especially full of fuel. Next, we take the pump plate off. Notice this cutout? It's circular except for this cutout. There's a nub, a raised nub right here. It's been painted red. That's where that flat goes to. That way your pump and pickup are situated in the proper position. 4mm. Remove the clamp at the bottom. 6 here on the pump plate. Before we can take this pump plate out, we are going to have to disconnect these 2 vent hoses that are on the inside. I used to have a stand for this, so I'm going to have to make another one. See here? I'm going to use a pick. You're going to put the pick in. See, I can't see. And then lever this way. And that opens that up. And use a pick to coax the hose away. Sometimes it just needs a little assistance. There's an electrical connector here. Right here. Need to squeeze the tabs together. It's a good job for that pick. Especially on this side, because you can't. Now, carefully lift this out. This has a screen on the end of the pump and a float next to the filter. There's our screen and the float. You don't want to bend the float. Look at this. Look at the amazing condition this is in. 8 years this bike's been sitting around. This is the fuel pump plate. Part of the fuel pump plate is this float on an arm. You would think that would be your fuel level indicator. It is not. It is your low fuel level indicator. You know, the light that comes on that says, ding, hey idiot, you're almost out of fuel. But you're not really out of fuel. The Germans are very, very generous in their reserve capacity. Of course, reserve capacity only in this case means that you have as much as whatever's left when the light comes on. The RT model, the fuel tank capacity is 6.8 gallons, 26 liters. And the low fuel light is to activate when there are 6 liters of fuel remaining, 1.5 gallons. Be careful though, because this is all fragile electronics. And this plate's really, really, really expensive. These 2, remember the 2 hoses we took out when we removed this fuel pump plate? Those 2 hoses still hanging down here in the tank. These go up to the cap. So we want to make sure the cap is clear. That's why I blew into the 2 hoses. Passage is good, and the cap is closed, so that flows properly. What those do, one is the vent. Under the cap, molded into the cap plate, is a tube that has a bulbous thing on the end. It looks like a float, but it doesn't float. It's a baffle. That's your tank breather. There's another hole in the cap plate that runs into another hose, the other hose that runs down here and into the pump plate, and that is your water drain. It passes from the filler cap via a hose down to the fuel pump plate, and then out via a hose to atmosphere, where the water is drained when your bike sits out in the rain. If that gets plugged, the cap fills up with water, and every time you open your fuel cap, all that water rushes into the fuel tank. So here we have those two fittings. These do get plugged. I've seen mud daubers plug them. We can blow into the end of the hoses. They're clean. You can fit a pipe cleaner down through, because you're going to get it past the elbow here. See? You want to get past there. Say that was there. Our vent hoses are clear. Next, I want to discuss fuel lines. These external hoses are specially molded as supplied from the factories. Here's one of them. And here's another, which when straightened out, of course, you know, it's got this bend. Most importantly, has this bend. They're a lot of money. They're over $75 each. Beamer Boneyard sells external fuel injection hose, along with fuel filter, your pump O-ring, clamps, and such. They do not offer this little U-shaped hose that replaces here. It's $50 from BMW. Beamer Boneyard does offer a plastic flexible piece that you can use. In this case, I have the BMW one on hand. I'm going to use it. Fuel filters. New one from Beamer Boneyard. Same as the old one. People get all weirded out about these clamps. I like these clamps. BMW calls these non-reusable. Take your pick. Insert it in the hole. This is your lever. You're going to lift up. You're going to go down. Being cautious of things around you, of course. We don't want to rip our screen off the filter or anything. So our clamp is loose now. Maybe we'll get a little looser. Move our float out of the way. I'm going to loosen this clamp. You are going to have a fuel spill. It's unavoidable. Your fuel flow works like this. This is submerged in the tank. This is your pickup screen. So any big debris that falls in through your filler cap would get captured by this. In a BMW with a metal tank, your deteriorating fuel liner that is rust colored would get trapped by this, provided it's not torn. This is an important component. Don't damage it. Fuel is taken in through the screen by the electronic fuel pump. This fuel pump runs at a pressure of 43 psi, 3 bar. It passes through the pump, pressurized, pushed out here, around this tube, back through your fuel filter, around that elbow at 43.5 psi still, through this tube and out off to the fuel rail that's mounted on the airbox of the bike. In that fuel rail is a fuel pressure regulator. This fuel goes into that fuel rail and then right back out the other tube, back in this hose, which runs right here and dumps out right here at the fuel filter. I'm going to clean this up. A little bit of mineral spirits and a rag. Get this out of the way. This just lifts off like this. Got to be careful here. Electronics. Be gentle. Let's move our float out of the way. How's this hose feel? If you look this little U-hose over real close and you're confident that it's not too hard, it's still flexible a bit, and it's not cracked, you know, if you're the kind of guy that's comfortable getting back into your fuel tank again, if that hose were to fail, go for it. I'm going to change it because it's a lot of work to get to this, and I would hate to give this back and get a phone call that, you know, they're on the side of the road somewhere, broken down, and it turns out that, you know, it's something stupid like this that could have been avoided. This is one of those cases where you got to put a little money towards it and pay the piper, as they say. Now, you look at this and you say, ah, you're fucking nuts. It's just a little piece of hose. You get a piece of hose, man, and bend it in half. You get a piece of hose and you bend it in half. Well, you don't get a piece of hose and bend it in half. Because if you get a piece of hose and you bend it in half, see what happens? See what happens when you bend the hose in half? That's the kind of loop you would have to make to not kink the hose. And even that's questionable right there. Probably use a little bit more. You'd have to go to that far to replace this elbow. So the Beamer Boneyard flexible item is a good substitute. I just happen to have one of these. It kinks. Even if it kinks just a little bit, you don't know. The bike starts up, right? You could ride on down the road all happy as a pig in poo. And you get on the highway and you roll on that throttle and you're motoring along in top gear. And your engine's getting hotter and hotter because you are in a lean condition. Because you're restricting the fuel flow. You're restricting the delivery of fuel. Change it. That's what I'm going to do here. This is a good case for a little dunk in the mineral spirits. Helps make things slippy enough to go right back on. Just like that. Just like that. Too tight in these. You need, yeah? See, the business end of things. In this case, I can get right to it, so here we go. Grab each side, squeeze, line your clamp before you get your final snug. See, And that's good right there. I'll use another one on here, but we'll put a regular screw type clamp here and here. And not a regular screw type clamp, but a regular fuel injection screw type clamp. See how these are smooth inside? Unlike a normal, as us Americans would know, screw type hose clamp that is serrated, perforated, has holes in it, of which it would bite into the rubber and damage the rubber and weaken the fuel injection hose. Don't use those kind of clamps on this hose. You have 43.5 psi of fuel pressure, 3 bars. So over here, I'm going to use one of these clamps from Beamer Boneyard. Oh no, what direction does it flow in? Remember, comes in through the screen on the fuel pump, down, around, and out. Well, there's your direction. Mineral spirits. You put a screw clamp here, you gotta make sure it doesn't interfere with the flow. Another one of these Beamer Boneyard clamps, which we will put the hardware on the top so it doesn't interfere with the flow. These can pop off. That is a tragedy in itself there. You send somebody off on their machine and they call later on the side of the road and you go and rescue them to find that, oops, the fuel filter someone put on popped off because they didn't have it clamped well enough or in the right place. A little bit of space away from the filter. See how this one is? Oh, nicey nice. That's where you want them to be. No obstructions, so the screw's not going to hit anything. It's good. It's all good. Tight, 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 tight. Next item. Fuel pump plate O-ring. I've seen these expand so they don't fit anymore because they're too big. And on a rare occasion you'll get them, they shrink. Fuel pump plate O-ring. If this fails, well, 6.8 gallons or what is remaining is going to be on the ground rather quickly. And there won't be a damn thing you can do about it without stripping your mirrors, your seat, your trim panels, the lateral trim panels, yeah, and the fuel tank. That's a lot of work. Fuel pump plate O-ring. I really have to recommend you change this each time. How about some Molly coat or something like that that you can work into the O-ring. We change it, but we help this to last a while too. We put a little Molly coat on the fingers. Don't need much, just a little bit, a little tiny bit. End up with more on your gloves than you do on the O-ring, I guess. Little knowledge, experience, and attention to detail goes a long ways with these machines. We'll address replacement of the fuel hoses on the outside after this is reinstalled. I think I've covered everything. We've discussed the vent system and how it goes from the cap for both rainwater down through a tube inside the tank to the pump plate, and then out of the pump plate into another rubber tube vented to atmosphere, and the tank's vent system, which is attached to the fuel cap and vents down through another tube which comes through this other port, and then vents to atmosphere if you've removed your charcoal canister. And for those of you who say, what does he mean, the charcoal canister? In the United States, our BMWs were equipped with a charcoal canister that took those fuel vapors and pumped them into a soup can full of charcoal. And there it was to dissolve and evaporate and vent less toxic air and no raw fuel out of the canister via another vent hose down with the rest of them. Bad system, because it clogs up and then your fuel tank doesn't vent anymore. And what happens? That tank shrinks and you suddenly have a fuel level gauge that does not work properly. So here in the United States, where we have such stupid things as this charcoal canister back then, I advise elimination of such. It is a hazard, not a help. Only country that had such things from BMW. So, we've covered the vent system. We have covered your low fuel light, float, and potential adjustment of such. We have discussed fuel hoses, condition of such, types, and changed our filter and our O-ring. So let's put this back on the tank. After fitting this into place, we are going to need to connect these two hoses. Take our mineral spirits and put a little in these tubes. This will help them slide on easier. Give us a little less grief. Could all use less grief, can't we? Are you ready yet? And remember, inside is the electrical connector. Before you bolt the fuel pump plate back together, make sure the O-ring is set in place. Make sure your pump mark is where it is supposed to be. And remember, there's a bump in the RT tank for the alignment point. But it won't matter if you put your marks on beforehand. With our vent hoses connected and our electrical connector plugged in, you may now reinstall the 6 bolts holding the fuel pump plate down, which torque to 6 Newton meters in a crosswise tightening pattern. You can go ahead and bust out the torque wrench for 6 Newton meters, but you're going to need a 1/4 inch drive torque wrench in deci-Newton meters, none of which makes a fucking shit bit of difference here. Just, you know, snug them down, but don't reef them. You don't want to distort the plate. You're just compressing that O-ring a little bit. 7th screw goes here, holding the 2 hoses together. Keep your vent hoses out of the loop. These stack over. If you're not sure, look at them. Who's clean? This one's dirty. You can see where the screw head is and the washer fits. Ha, there's your guy that's on top. Line them up. A little snug. That's it. What you can do with the vent hoses, we can run those right here. Just like that. And that concludes the fuel filter portion of our show.